Our next speaker for today, we have Nagaraju Kakarla, Director of Cloud Engineering from Fidelity Investments. Nag Kakarla is currently a director and chapter leader as a part of Enterprise Computing Cloud Group at Fidelity Investments. He is an information technology and software development leader with 20 plus years of distinct multidisciplinary background in IT consulting, as well as product-based global organizations. Expert in architecting and nurturing strong, geographically distributed teams with focus on innovation, speed, and scale, and driving business value. Nag is a technology thought leader and professional AWS architect, primarily focusing on cloud, SRE, and DevOps over the last 5 to 6 years. Nag has a rich experience in helping multiple organizations in cloud and automation journey as part of their digital transformation. His topic for today is DevOps and SRE for digital transformation.
Hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. First of all, a very warm welcome to DevOps India Summit 2021. In the true spirit of DevOps India Summit, and especially the theme for this year, DevOps and SRE, let's talk a little bit about how DevOps and SRE, right, they play a key role as part of your digital transformation. And likewise, I'd like to share a little bit about how we have been following it at Fidelity Investments. My name is Nagaraju Kakarla. I'm a director of cloud engineering at Fidelity. There's a little bit of disclaimer there to make sure people know that this is more of a reflection of my thoughts and not endorsing anything related to Fidelity, and likewise, we're not endorsing any vendor or product service. Again, I briefly mentioned about it. So primarily, I lead multiple tracks here at Fidelity. One is the DevOps enablement chapter, where I'm the chapter leader. Then we manage the whole CI/CD portfolio here, and we also help our business units, in the journey towards, migrating their workloads to cloud, building new platforms, establishing standards, best practices, so on and so forth. With that, we'll have a quick glance at the agenda I have for this session today. We'll not, go too much into what DevOps and DevSecOps are all about, and likewise SRE, because we are well past the time to actually talk of, what they're all about. It's all about the how part. I think that actually makes more sense, especially for this year's session. Talking about digital transformation, how they play a key role there, some of the key tenets of digital transformation itself, we'll have a look at it, and likewise some of the trends prevailing across the industry today when we talk of DevSecOps and SRE, and some of the predictions for the next few years. So we'll go a little bit deeper into that, and then certainly I would like to share some thoughts around how Fidelity Investments has been pioneering the whole investments around DevOps and SRE, and how that's really giving us rich dividends when it comes to digital transformation. And that's where, in fact, recently we got multiple awards, be it from CD Foundation or the DevOps group themselves, so on and of course many other organizations. With that, let's quickly move into the next slide. Let's talk a bit about why digital transformation is becoming more of an essential thing today for organizations. Right? It's not a good to have anymore, and even for the organizations that are not necessarily pioneering digital transformation, but actually transforming or at different stages of their transition when it comes to digital transformation. Right? And there are some key aspects which may not be implemented the right way or the way it should be implemented to actually achieve true success from a digital transformation perspective, right? We'll talk a little bit about those things on this slide. The very first one, if you see, certainly every organization, they want to be, in fact, many of the organizations are actually tech-driven today, and they're actually trying to move more and more towards product operating model, right? So when we say product operating model, essentially organizing your solutions around specific products in line with the customer outcomes, the business outcomes, right? Now, how we can actually do that, and how DevOps and SRE play a role there. We'll talk a little bit about that. And the other key thing, which all of us know, is that especially with the advent of many of the startups, some of the unicorns, and so forth, there are no confined boundaries today for any of the businesses, right? And competition, it may just, spring up from anywhere. And so we need to be really ready for it. And being ready, right, it doesn't necessarily mean just looking out for it. Being ready means you're actually equipping yourself, advancing yourself so that, you continue to be, safe, right? There's no comfort zone today. Essentially, that's what I mean to say. And to be, able to get out of that comfort zone, we have to keep innovating, we have to keep advancing. That's where digital transformation plays a big role. And keeping up with the changing market transitions, so very similar to the previous point I mentioned. While it's important that organizations, as an organization, we want to keep up with the market transition, as much important is the fact that we want to retain the customer base, even as we, try to expand the customer base, right? So to be able to meet the customer demand in a meaningful manner, to be able to, deliver the right experience for the customers. I think that plays, a very, vital role there, which essentially means it's about speed and scale. And it's not just about speed and scale, being able to deliver solutions, right? And advance those solutions, enhance those solutions with the right quality and security, right? For organizations like Fidelity, any organization for that matter, right? The security, right, has to be paramount. And that's where DevSecOps, is the standard today, right? We don't necessarily, refer to DevOps as DevOps anymore. It's DevSecOps. It's a de facto standard today. Right? And we'll talk a bit about how we are actually integrating security as part of our DevOps culture here at Fidelity. Right? And to be able to do this, right, and to have the speed and scale, being able to deliver the solutions with the right quality and security, you have to be focusing on automation only approach, right? It becomes a critical thing. Again, it's not a good to have thing. Like I said, if you really want to accelerate your business benefits, you have to focus on automation as much as possible, right? So across all the key aspects of people, process, and technology, right? It's not just one of those, right? You have to focus on all the three key elements. Right? And the other one, when talking about technology, right, one thing that becomes more and more important, day by day, is about being data driven as much as possible, right? To be able to get actionable insights, and likewise to be able to actually act on those insights. So essentially, turning your IT from a cost center to a value center, right? That's where digital transformation forms the center of everything. With that, let's quickly move on to the next one to talk a little bit about key DevOps and SRE trends, and connect it back to the digital transformation that we were talking about on the previous slide, why these two become very essential. And we'll not necessarily go through each of the the trends here, but some of the emerging ones. And by the way, while industries continue to accelerate the adoption of Agile, DevSecOps, SRE very rapidly across the industry, some of the things that are really emerging as mainstream are things like AI ops innovation, and being able to implement things, right, in a data ops-centric model, right? Being able to provision your infrastructure, right, through some of the modern practices like infrastructure as code. And by the way, infrastructure as code is not modern anymore. Thanks to the advent of cloud, right, everything is infrastructure as cloud, infrastructure as code when you go to cloud. And being able to replicate that on-premise as well, right? And that is the essential thing today, right? That's where being able to write everything as code and then post it in a source code repository, like it could be Bitbucket, Git, or whatever it is, right? In the source code repository, and being able to version control that, right, without necessarily, in fact, without any secrets, right? And that is another best practice. Best practice. And likewise, from an SRE standpoint, observability, chaos engineering, some of the things, right, which were niche and implemented by some of the front runners at the best-in-class organizations, till the recent past, they are becoming mainstream today. It's a trend across the industry today, if you see. And being able to build hybrid models without necessarily depending on only your on-premise versus part of the workload in cloud, and how you can actually get the best of both worlds, including open source, by the way, right? Where organizations had a lot of apprehension 2 years back in terms of adopting open source, but today that landscape has completely changed. In terms of one, adopting the open source and being able to customize that open source in line with the needs, that's one. And likewise, contributing back to open source, right? Which gives great advantages both to businesses and likewise to engineers also, especially engineers from an employee standpoint. If you look at it, especially for the engineers to be able to think differently, innovatively, in terms of how they could actually build on top of some of the best things that's already collectively done across the industry. That's what open source is all about. And likewise, cloud microservices, containers, serverless, right? I think none of these need any introduction. Right? If you really want to be successful, if you want to really get the best out of the innovation that's happening across public cloud, it could be any vendor of your choice. But the fact remains that there's so much of innovation out there, and especially if you're moving from legacy or microservices to legacy or monolithic to microservices, which again is very essential, right? If you want to really achieve the digital transformation and to be able to run those workloads, microservices-based workloads natively in containers and get the best out of some of the innovation in cloud, you have to have your workloads out there in the cloud. And likewise, you could actually have your on-premises implementation of containers in your workloads, right? There are options for that also, but the point is you have to adopt the newest technologies to be able to get the best out of your workloads and to be able to deliver things really fast. The speed and scale that we were talking about in the previous slide, right? If you really want to achieve that, you have to adopt these things. Right? The comps framework, all of us we are aware, right? What comps is all about. The mainstream of your DevOps, right? The very first thing perhaps that we heard, from a DevOps standpoint, years back, the culture, automation, lean, measurement, and share. Every piece of this, right? They're very important, right? And they're not good to have anymore. And likewise, from an SRE standpoint, if you look at it, being able to implement things, track the progress, and being able to, gauge resiliency of the stability of applications against, your SLAs. In fact, SLA is a passive norm. It's all about SLOs and SLIs, which essentially means you have to have internal targets, and without necessarily looking at SLAs. Okay, we have a 4-hour SLA with the customer, so we are fine, right? So that comfort has gone. Right? In fact, you can't have that comfort anymore. You have to look at what is the service level objective and what is the actual service level indicator, and to actually consistently looking at improving that. Right? That is something which is very important. And if you have an error budget of 2 hours, right, per month, per quarter, or whatever, you can't really cross that, right, unless there is an exceptional situation. Right? And by the way, your thought has to be to kind of avoid that exceptional situation so that you don't cross your error budgets and you really just. And by the way, error budgets is a concept from an SRE standpoint, and which is becoming a trend today across organizations. Okay. The next one is value stream mapping. I'll quickly breeze through that. It's all about measuring your portfolio, the whole the set of applications, the portfolio of applications, right, based on the business criticality, tier 1, 2, 3, whatever standards of the practices you follow at your organization, and then deciding for the various phases. And by the way, which phase you need to adopt, right? The 6 R's that we have from a cloud migration standpoint, right? If you want to do a quick lift and shoot, or to do a re-platforming, re-architecting, right? Writing it all together, say from a legacy application to a microservices, and then what kind of models you need to adopt to be able to run those microservices effectively, or having some of the native services like containers, cloud-based containers, so on and so forth, right? So to be able to decide that, you need to do a thorough value stream management, right? To understand where you get the best out of your investment, where it actually is going to contribute best from a customer benefit perspective and at the customer experience perspective, right? That's how we need to look at it. And having the right mix of your platforms and tools. Oftentimes, this is one area where many of the organizations, right, they struggle to find a fine balance in terms of having the platforms and tools, right? This is fundamentally important. One is, from a it could be from, because of licensing reasons, it could be because of, the talent, it could be something else. But the fact remains that you have to have a fine balance when it comes to platforms and tools, and need to look at various standard practices that are typically looked at from across the industry, right? To make sure that you have the right set of tools and platforms, including some of the cloud native services for that matter, to ensure, one, you can actually, effectively deliver your software, supply chain, and post-delivery, your services are always up and available, right, for the customers. You actually deliver that, intended features and the experience for the customers. And if something goes wrong, how quickly you can actually restore that? And can you actually, do it in an automated fashion as much as possible? That's the whole essence of, the trends. With that, we'll quickly move on to some of the predictions, right? Again, many of the industry analysts, be it, Gartner, Forrester, so on and so forth, and you can actually refer to some of the, studies of, white papers also. whereby it is highly predicted some of the things like AI/ML becoming mainstream in the next a few years, not too far into the future again, next 3 to 5 years, right? Hyper automation, like we're talking about automation is still for many organizations, automation is more of a good to have. How it is going to be, mainstream. It's not just mainstream. It is a necessity. It is already a necessity, and going forward, it's going to become even more critical, right? And having that multi-cloud setup, right? The edge clouds, right? In fact, the prediction is that more and more, adoption will be there for the edge going forward. And likewise, having that decoupled architectures, right? Having it as modular as possible, so that you can actually operate without necessarily impacting the whole, set of application. Rather, that's where the microservices, as all of us know, right? It helps us to a great extent. If something goes wrong with a particular feature, you're not impacting the whole application, which typically used to be the case with legacy applications are a big monolith, basically. Right? Moving towards product-centric, we already touched upon this, but again, how you organize yourself based on products that you deliver, right? With clear, ownership of each of the products, and the teams itself actually organized around those products. Self-centered, self-managed, teams, basically. Anything and everything related to the product, it has to be one team. That's the whole essence of DevOps culture, itself. It's not just about, bridging the gap between Dev and Ops, which used to be the, practice years back. But it's all about how you can actually have one team managing everything, right? While we can debate, endlessly about what DevOps is all about, and unfortunately, we have so many definitions and practices, and the way it is followed across the industry. But some of the best practices still remain same. And that's what we need to essentially look at. Right? The focus on total experience, Internet of Behaviors, a step further on top of Internet of things, IoT that we have today, and being able to operate from anywhere. In fact, this is something we have seen in the last 1.5 years. Thanks to the situation we have been having with COVID-19. Unfortunately, it's been a bad situation. But one positive outcome, at least I personally see out of this, is being able to operate from anywhere, and that is going to be one of the standards. So right now it's more of a de facto standard, but going forward it may well become a standard. And focus on cybersecurity, right, in a meshed model, basically, right, so that it becomes more and more difficult for the hackers to actually bust into your organization, right? And at the center of all of this is going to be DevOps and SRE again. Now let's quickly switch gear a little bit. So what we were looking at so far was the importance of digital transformation, why it's becoming essential, right? And it's more and more an essential thing, or the required thing for organizations. Likewise, some of the trends and predictions from a DevOps and SRE standpoint. Now I'd like to throw some light around how we have been implementing some of these practices at Fidelity Investments. To begin with, one of the key things I spoke about earlier in terms of moving towards a product IT operating model. Majority of the groups across Fidelity Investments today are all product centric, right? So with self-serve capabilities, self-managed teams, self-driven teams, right? You can name anything related to a product, right from the inception, the design, architecture, and then building the infrastructure, right, in the code, being able to operate everything, right? It's all managed by a single team, right? So it's a highly powered team, highly empowered teams being able to do anything and everything along those. Right? And talking about product IT operating model and any of the newest practices, be it DevOps, and all of these, typically the focus is around people, process, and technology. But we also need to look at some of the fundamental things which are more fundamental than these three, which is culture, for example. Right? Do we have the right structure? Right? For example, at Fidelity, Agile is at the center of everything. In fact, we are actually centered around Agile, including the organizational structure, the very structure that we have. And it is actually, imported more and more into our culture. It's not just for today. The culture is a long-term thing. In fact, in my view, that is one most important thing even ahead of people, process, and technology. Right? The culture has to be integrated into each of these elements: people, process, and technology. One is the adoption of Agile, and again, talking about Agile is not just about adopting some of the standard Agile practices like Scrum, Kanban, right, and so on and so forth. But are we really Agile, right? To be able to embrace any of the changes, right? If there is a situation, how quick we are to be able to get out of the situation, or even better, can we actually get out of the situation in an automatic fashion as much possible, right? That's the thinking that we have at Fidelity. Talking about the structure, it's a very integrated IT organization. Some of the things like multi-speed IT that we typically talk about, right? I seldom see any differences, between various business units in terms of the maturity, right? Each of the business units, they're highly matured in their own right, and more than anything, the culture part which I was, talking about earlier, is a great culture in terms of actually sharing the best practices across the organizations, and also having, the combined ownership for some of the things that we'd like to advance at org level. Right? It's a great, support both at, leadership level and likewise. That is something, culture plays a big part actually, right? So whether it is done in pockets or is done at org level, right? We really have to build that culture, right? So I'm really privileged, to be part of an organization like that. And moving on, from a process standpoint, and again, for a large enterprise like Fidelity, right, typically, at least in my experience, I've seen a lot of the organizations, right, where it gets really, delayed because of the, the process, restrictions that you can't get out of the process. You need to just, purely follow the process. But end of the day, if you see, the process are basically for us to, to be able to conduct ourselves, and advance further, right, to be able to, better our things for the better solutions for the customers, employees, right, alike. But then if process itself becomes a bottleneck, it's not going to help us. That's where I think, one of the key aspects of Fidelity is revisiting those processes at a very, consistent, intervals, right? To see whether the process is really relevant for us and being able to, get out of a particular process or refine that and build new process, right? And then technology, needless to mention, it's all about, codify. One of my leaders, he actually calls it as codifying everything, which is pretty cool, by the way, right? Being able to codify everything, right, from your infrastructure, your applications, actually moving from legacy or monoliths to microservices, and having the right, set of platforms, right, including, it could be Kubernetes, Docker, Kubernetes, or the native containers, some of the cloud native services, so on and so forth. And again, options are many, right? It all depends on, organizations, preferences also, but we have a great mix of, both open source, proprietary, plus, some of the cloud native services, which really enables us in terms of advancing our journey further, be it from a cloud migration. And once you migrate to cloud, and there is this misnomer, move your workforce into cloud and magic happens, which is not, true. You need to have the right governance model, right FinOps models, if you will, right, to actually see how we're actually operating our workforce in cloud. Are we actually getting the best out of those cloud? So those governance models actually, they have to form part of your culture, right? They have to be integrated into a culture, something which we do really well at Fidelity. Quickly moving on, right? And to be able to do some of the good things that we were talking about earlier, right? Essentially, some of these key principles, just to summarize, right? We have certain guardrails, and I'll talk a little bit, in terms of how we actually, follow these guardrails and ensure whether we are really following these or not. But just to quickly call out, from the key principles perspective itself, right? The leveraging open source, we briefly, spoke about it in one of the previous slides, right? Are we really open to open source? Yes, absolutely, we are open. We are leveraging open source as much possible. And likewise, we are contributing to open source also. Recently, in the space of Kubernetes, we actually contributed to Kconnect, right? Which is a wonderful tool, and you may want to explore in terms of what it's all about, and you can connect offline as well. And that's just one example. There's so many such examples where we are contributing to open source ourselves as much as we are adopting open source. Buy versus build, like I briefly said earlier. And by the way, talking about buy versus build, it's not just about buy versus build. Many of the in-house solutions we build ourselves wherever we can't find ready-made solutions in the market. And likewise, sunsetting legacy applications is equally important. Something which we do really well, right? Especially applications where you don't see a great amount of customer value, or even internally in terms of conducting our business, some of the enterprise applications, right? And so we make the right decisions at the right times, and I think that is very key. Right? Customizations, and again, in situations where we may go and buy some of the solutions, we don't end up spending too much of time, endless time, trying to customize solutions on top of them. We work with our partners, right? especially the partners who have built those solutions, right? We actually respect them, right? For the expertise, the collective expertise they may have working around that product, and also based on inputs they may get from various other customers. So we turn to them to actually do some of those customization, right? Rather than, burning midnight oil. We rather look for, building some of the in-house solutions where we can't find solutions in the market, right? So collectively, the idea here is in terms of building those self-service capabilities as much possible. Right? And moving on to the next one, APIs. Anything and everything we do at Fidelity is all API driven. It's a great model, right? Both in terms of how we build APIs, the best practices, governance models, how do we manage the APIs on-prem and within cloud, right? Including some of the cloud-native services that we use, right? Again, there's a great mix here. They will be happy to share, in details around the whole API, gamut at Fidelity in some of the, future conferences, perhaps. Right? Again, the focus is around everything as code. Like I said, codify everything and focus on automation as much as possible, right? You may be codifying everything, right? But then are you using that code effectively? Are we actually version controlling and tracking the code effectively, right? Is it really available for anyone, anybody on the team, right? Being able to onboard our engineers on day one, right? Having the right set of models to be able to onboard our employees or engineers, depending on their roles, right? That is another great thing, which we have established internally at Fidelity, right? 12-factor app. I'm sure many of you must be aware of some of the key aspects of 12-factor app, right from having the single code base, being in terms of dividing your build versus run, and also from monitoring perspective in terms of administering the application, right? So moving from legacy to microservices based architectures, and how we actually implement your microservices, things of that sort. So many of those key aspects play a key role. And that's fundamentally integrated into anything and everything that we build at Fidelity. Even as it's been a practice for some of the modern services that we have been building over the last few years. Even for the legacy or monolithic services that we are converting into modern services, this is something which is a standard that we follow. And the next one is, and oftentimes it's easy to lose ourselves looking for perfection, but we put in a very conscious effort to have that fine balance between pace and perfection. Both are equally important, right? You can't, lag there looking for perfection. At the same time, you can't build something fake, but if you don't have the right, solution, the right security, right quality, it's not going to help either. So it's all about the fine balance, and which we always, look for. And the next few things, I guess we already spoke about it, in terms of decoupled architectures, building our own capabilities, adopting from the industry, likewise sharing with the industry, and mentoring and training. This is a big one for us at Fidelity, and I'll talk a little bit in detail in the subsequent slides. Now we have all these, guardrails, and culturally we have organized ourselves to be able to, follow those in a very religious manner. It's all about, enabling that open, transparent, and inclusive culture. Right? Three key things if you look at it. Right? Building an open culture where people feel empowered. It's pretty transparent, right? Nothing is, held from the, employees or engineers for that matter, right? So giving the timely communication, sharing the timely communication, and making them inclusive to the party. It's not just about a top-down approach or, pushing something from the leadership, but it's all about, including our teams, getting their feedback, getting their voice heard. Like someone rightly said, every point of view matters, right? We actually celebrate those, collective differences, but then end of the day, we take a decision together. Okay, that's something which has been really working well for us. And likewise, next one, building a culture of innovation. Right, and this is fundamentally important if you really want to advance your digital transformation journey. And again, people, process, and technology always they're there, but the governance, some of the key principles that we have as guardrails that I shared in the previous slide. Right? We should have the right, the mechanisms to actually track that. Okay, you have these guardrails, but are we really following that? That's where there's a dedicated focus of Fidelity in terms of having a head of engineering excellence, right? Who actually works across various business units, some of the leads across, various BOs who themselves have, similar roles. Likewise, having an enterprise DevOps council, this is a big thing for us, whereby we have, number of experts across various business, units coming together, forming this DevOps council or DevSecOps council, as we call it, right? To understand how we are actually following DevOps, SRE, and some of these, practices across each of the BUs, right? Where we have certain challenges, who are actually advancing further, who is ahead compared to other folks, without necessarily thinking about anything, openly sharing about how things are done across various VOs, and actually learning from each other's experiences. Like I said briefly earlier, the multi-speed IT, that is something which we have been overcoming in the recent years, and day by day is getting even better, so that we have same level of maturity, very high level of maturity across each of the business units. Process is always there. I briefly spoke about it earlier. Revisiting the process, being able to fine-tune your process, and if so required, just sunset the process and then build a new process altogether, right? Adopt that data-centric model, analytic models of operations, right? Being able to get actionable insights and then acting on those insights, right? Both are equally important, right? Technology, needless to mention, cloud, be it from a cloud perspective, building the right platforms, right? Both on-premises, cloud, specific platforms, APIs is a big one for us, right? And being able to embed that intelligence into your system across the software supply chain, right? And that is very, very important. And even post-delivery into your production, do you have the right set of models, for monitoring your applications? Essentially, do you have the resiliency built into your applications rather than, working reactively? How proactively we can operate? In fact, today, I'm very happy to share that pretty much, anything and everything we have around production, we have, chatbots, right? Including many of the tickets, right? It's more of a self-serve capability for our, employees and engineers, so that they can actually be as much productive, right? In terms of their deliverables, and building the self-aware infrastructure, and focusing on codifying everything. And last but not the least, from a people or talent perspective, this is a very big thing, which I'm personally very proud of, because just to provide a little bit of history there, earlier we used to have learning days, every other Tuesday, and that became a big hit. Right? We observed over a period of 6 months to 1 year, 6 to 9 months perhaps, and there was a great feedback from engineers, and that's where I think there was tremendous support from the leadership also in terms of making it a weekly thing. Now today, as we speak, every Tuesday at Fidelity is a learning day for our employees, our engineers, right? Which is actually helping us advance their own skills, basically upskilling themselves, and likewise contributing in a much better way to the business outcomes. So it's a great win-win, and I haven't seen this kind of a setup or culture at many organizations, and especially for a behemoth, financial services behemoth like Fidelity Investments. It's a huge commitment from the organization, and that incidentally is helping us in terms of advancing our digital transformation. Right? That is built into our culture fundamentally. That's what I'm trying to talk about. Quickly moving on to the next one, it's all about metrics. Anything and everything that we do here, including some of the metrics that we're looking forward to implement, on top of what we have already done, like from a DORA perspective, look at some of the key metrics that you must be familiar, like your lead time, deployment frequency, then change failure rate, MTTR, mean time to restore if something happens in production, right? And how are we doing today? How do we measure, including the very process that you may have to measure these things, right? And getting those actionable insights and being able to improve those, both for your engineers, employees, and then eventually for the customers. And obviously, anything and everything that we do is centering around customers. And that's the very reason why any of us exist from an organization standpoint, right? And it's a cycle typically, right? You assess it first, you benchmark, right? What do you want to achieve, right? What are some other things that you feel you achieve based on the current setting? Assess yourself, right? How frequently you want to do it? What is the cycle time, quality, things of that sort, like we quickly spoke. And then measure it on an ongoing basis, right? And to be able to mature further, and then come back and then reassess, right? Rebaseline, and again it goes back. I'm sure many of you, must be following the State of DevOps report, which gets released every year. And I think just a few weeks back, Puppet and Dora, they released it. Some great insights. I would highly recommend, even the DevOps team, the DevOps India Summit, organizers, they keep talking about it, and they keep encouraging. The great insights from DevOps, the State of DevOps report. I would highly encourage. Is do look forward to what are some of the things that these best of breed companies are actually implementing, right? So many of the things which I spoke of that we are implementing at Fidelity, and that's where Fidelity has been, recognized as one of those companies for DevOps transformation, right? Be it from Linux Foundation, CD Foundation, the DevOps.com, DevOps Days, just to name a few, right? Which is a great testimony to how we have been able to achieve success through these newest practices. But again, just to cut it short, please feel free to refer to get more details. With that, we'll quickly move on to the next one. Again, just reiterating what I said earlier. You gauge your current maturity, and based on that, you build your baseline and measure yourself where we stand today, right? Be it from an agile standpoint, which is fundamentally important today if you look at it, right? That's the foundation, right, for digital transformation. That's what I would say. And then comes your DevOps, DevSecOps, SRE, some of the other practices from an automation standpoint, right? The adopting newest technologies, the cloud, right? Containers, so on and so forth. Right? Essentially, your DevSecOps, CI/CD, the whole software delivery supply chain, the very process that you have for software delivery supply chain, and how you're actually doing with respect to that, right? And how you could mature further, right? So essentially, look at the current maturity, baseline or benchmark yourself with respect to some of the key metrics there from a test automation perspective, cloud or microservice adoption, automated audits, which is a big one for a financial services organization like Fidelity, by the way. Right? And the very process you adopt to actually measure those things, the key aspects, the KPIs, right? So you need to also look at that very process, right, to make sure you're actually measuring it the right way. And then implementing some of the practices that we just spoke about, agile plus automation, DevSecOps, right? The stories, so on and so forth, to be able to drive those KPIs, to be able to deliver what your business would be looking forward to, be it in terms of faster time to market, improving your user experience, be it customers or employees, both are equally important. Right? How you can actually reduce your total cost of operations, how you can be more and more efficient. So that is one, and how your solutions, could be more and more effective for your customers. Both are equally important. Being able to, operate efficiently and being able to deliver solutions, effectively, rather effective solutions, right? Adopting some of the industry best practices. That is another one. Essentially, how you can, get the best out of your, investment, the return on investment, right? And how you could possibly become one of those leaders or one of those best of breed companies, when the industry reports like the state of DevOps report, and it could be state of cloud or whatever, comes out. Right? With that, one key takeaway on top of what I had shared so far, again, it's all about doing, right? Do it now. DevOps is all about doing. DevOps, SRE, any of those in the newest engineering practices, it's all about doing, acting, act or accelerate now. I'm sure many of the organizations, many of you must be doing it in some form or shape. And some of the folks may be already in advanced stages. And please come forward and share any of the best practices that you may be implementing at your respective organizations. But if not, it's the time to act. And otherwise, we'll always, have to think about it. Right? You may end up thinking about, oh, wish I knew it earlier. Right? Be it from an individual standpoint or organization. From an individual standpoint, especially if you want to advance your career, right, in a very active manner, right? You have to put in the conscious effort in terms of upskilling yourself and being able to actively contribute to your respective organization, right? So that you can advance your career. And in the process, inherently, you'll be helping your organization advance. That's what I want to leave you with. Thank you.